Welcome! And coming up in this week's Tech Show, big news in the downhill world. Also, a post-apocalyptic gravel bike, plus another brand offering shorter cranks. And we'll be talking to some industry insiders about a secret new pattern that might change all of our bikes in the near future. Yes, some of you mentioned in the comments, and yes, thanks for the chat, Steve, that gearboxes and belt drives aren't exactly new, but I feel like the topic we discussed last week could be a real step change in the industry, and it could be the start of something really interesting and a move away from the status quo of drivetrains. So, with that in mind, when we saw a new pattern from SRAM, for what initially looks like, well, just a brake mount, we knew we had to dig in a little bit deeper. SRAM launched the UDH, the Universal Derailleur Hanger, way back in 2019, and I'll be honest, I was super happy with that first one. Okay, the hanger only fitted on certain frames, but more and more brands realigned to the new standard. And okay, the hanger was good too, it's pretty stiff. I mean, I did worry that it might be a bit too stiff. Those hangers are meant to be the bit that breaks, saving your mech and frame from damage. Then, 2023, T-Type, an all-new drivetrain was launched with a new derailleur mount. SRAM seem to have they've patented a new brake mount. Well, it looks like just a new brake mount. And to my nerdy eye, it looks like a mount that a couple of smaller brands have already sort of used. So what's going on with this new mount? Very soon after this release, or this kind of tease, Ali from Redburn Designs, one of the friends here at GMBN Tech, posted lots of designs that he developed about a coaxial brake mount that he developed. So we dived in and chatted with Ali to find out all his thoughts on this design and what's going on with it. I guess, yeah, like you posted about something that looks really similar to the SRAM pattern. That's normally a good thing, that there's lots of brands doing lots of similar thinking. So yeah, what do we need another standard? What's the logic behind it? And sort of why, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I posted because I saw the press release or the about this patent that had been granted, and it just so happened it was a project that I had decided to work on by myself. You know, whenever UDH came along, the Universal Derailleur Hanger, it just spurred on. It made a lot of sense to try and say, well, it has advantages. Why are we not applying that? You know, if the hub axle and the cassette and the brake rotor all pivot around the same point, why not use that as the datum then for not just shifting but for braking? So it was quite logical, and that's why you'll have seen SAR bicycles and quite a few other people have used something similar. It's not new to have your rear axle going through the brake mount, you know, and it's logic that it makes a lot of sense. You fasten everything up that way and you should get better alignment. So I wasn't surprised to see other people do it. I suppose I was pleased to see that SRAM had put a patent out, because in my opinion, UDH is a good thing for the bike industry, albeit it's a new standard and it has its challenges, but I think it's a positive step forwards. Not to push new standards down everybody's throats, but if the whatever they call this brake system comes out and it's a new standard, you know, I don't see any downside to that really. And you'll have seen it with I think Scott and a few other bike brands, even Forbidden, use something similar where the brake adapters bolted to this. You know, there are quite a few people, and it goes back as far as, I mean, actually when I posted it, it spurred quite a lot of conversation from people within the industry, and it goes back as far as the mid 90s. Brian Berthold actually looked like he had designed something pretty much very similar anyway. He had this thing called brake therapy, and it goes back to then. So I've got photographs actually that he kind of sent through. So it's not a new concept, but when I started to dig into the patent, I have kind of seen what I think, or my interpretation is, of exactly the part of it that they're kind of driving for, which is new, isn't new, who's to say? And obviously the patent office think it is. So and it has merit, you know, in terms of the alignment, and it's not dissimilar to the way that you'll be familiar with T-Type, and when you tighten up your axle before you tighten the derailleur, and you know, so actually the patent is more focused, in my opinion, around that part of the brake system. My actual opinion on why I started working on it was, at the time I was working with a local frame builder just like 5 miles from here, and he was explaining just how much of a nuisance it is for guys that are building a couple of steel frames in their workshop a year. You know, they're buying brake mounts and dropouts from a couple of different suppliers, one in the UK, some in the States, and trying to get their tubes from Reynolds or Columbus. And actually there was such a variety, a hodgepodge of different parts. It was quite difficult each time and time consuming to get a brake mount set up. So I was thinking, well, surely and I was telling him about UDH, and he was like, a little bit old school in his thinkings. And I'm like, why would you not use UDH? Surely that makes life easier for you. And he's like, oh no, here are the two dropouts that I can get. And you're like, okay. So it made me think brake mounts, so I actually saw the opportunity not in the mainstream bike industry or the mass market, but in the kind of bespoke, boutique frame building sector, and coming up with an idea that would allow them to just have one set of brake mounts and one kind of standardized, I suppose it is a standardized way of attaching those, and then it would make life easier. They could swap, and I suppose then it became obvious that, well, if you've got a 220 mil rotor downhill bike or a 160 mil XC bike, surely the system should be the same. You can just have a different mount, and it gives the customer flexibility too if they decide to change their mind.
Well, seems like a good thing, doesn't it? We all get a better mount. And well, even if you don't use or don't want to use T-Type, the UDH is sort of a good thing because it means that, well, you can use it. I mean, at the moment, T-Type is only electronic, but it's still one hanger to rule them all. So is this mount going to be one mount to rule them all? Sauer Bicycles, the German brand that featured on the show a number of times, have a similar mount on their steel bikes. Perhaps this new mount and Sauer's new mount is just convergent evolution. For the bird fans, my example is a bit like swifts and swallows. Sort of look the same, but actually they're unrelated. It's just that they're hunting the same prey, and that's why they look alike. We wanted to dig a lot deeper, so we chatted to Christoph at Sauer. If we've got potentially a new brake standard, is it going to be similar to how we don't have limit screws on Rim X, perhaps?
Yeah, I think we're going into the same exact way. Like if you compare, I sometimes compare it with the car industry. There's a lot of people that like the Lada Niva, for example. It's a car that's been built for 40 years the exact same way. And you have all those little grease studs that you can use. And you're like, yeah, you can do maintenance yourself. True. But also you have to do it. So what we thought, and initially me coming from a mountain bike background, with getting more and more electronics into shifting systems, I was like, no, I'm not going to ride that on my bikes. And I'm all mechanical on my bigger full suspension bikes and everything that's more on the downhill side. Because if you break one of those derailleurs, it's just expensive. It still is, and a derailleur from the big ass is just like $70, and you're good to go, right? But having one of those XS derailleurs on my dropper bike also shows of how easy and fast the setup is, and also how it doesn't need any maintenance. Like it just works basically. Yeah, you mount it on, you have that app. Okay, you need an app to adjust your derailleur, but you're actually doing it just once when you're setting it up, and then that's it. Like I wouldn't. We always have, like, especially in the bike industry, we have to. The world standard is used fairly often, and it's all okay if you define certain things. It's okay if somebody defines something different for the exact thing, right? That's what everybody. What makes it so cool, so you can interchange things and stuff. But sometimes it's also just a pain. Like if you check the actual dimensioning from SRAM and Shimano on brake caliper position relative to the axle of the hub, depending on different disc sizes, you can see that there's always a little bit of difference depending on which disc size you do. So for frame manufacturers, that actually it brings a lot of headache, and that's why every brake manufacturer makes its own brake adapters as well. It's because it's not standardized.
Okay, that is very interesting, and some real advantages to the design. And as Ali mentioned, it's not all new, so they've been around before, so it's a kind of inspired design. But I think what's most interesting about what Christoph was saying and his interpretation of the pattern is that maybe there's more to this mount than just the brake mount, and maybe it's sort of a Trojan horse, a bit like UDH has been. Join the debate in the comments below. Let us know your thoughts and ideas. Will this brake mount develop into, well, the future? Let us know. Gates team news. Yes, this unsuspecting thingy has made big news this week. Just as we released the tech show last week, Gates announced their partnership with 4 UCI World Cup downhill teams for the 2025 season. There's Reece Wilson's brand, the Aon Racing team, Continental Atherton, MS Racing and Intense Factory Racing. So Aon, so Reece's team, will be racing aboard some prototype Gamix Sego downhill bikes. The Athertons have now shown their prototype A200G, which is very interesting. MS Racing will be lining on what we believe will be the zeroed G3 downhill bike. And Intense Factory Racing will be presumably on their newest gearbox-equipped version of their M1. It's really interesting to see so many teams partner up with Gates, all vying for that €100,000 belted prize purse for the first team to win any elite downhill World Cup race. Those teams contain several World Cup and World Championship winning riders, so it's going to be a really interesting subplot for this season's World Cup. Not to mention seeing how all these belt-driving gearbox bikes actually get developed. Lots of interesting stuff. Okay, here's an awesome bike. This is Danger Home's Scott Solis E-Ride. And, well, I just think it's magical. We've got gravel and we've got e-bikes, and we're thinking about the future, and, well, we're sort of looking backwards because this bike did come out a little bit earlier, but Scott have released all the images and all the information about Danger Home's latest custom build. We did see this last year at Eurobike, and here it is in all its glory. Danger Home's totally custom Scott Solis E-Ride Wasteland gravel bike. There's a lot there, I know. It's themed as a post-apocalyptic bike, and to quote Scott, it's a bike made to ride into the unknown. So, as you'd expect from Danger Home, it's completely unique and custom throughout. You've got the wild-looking forks with multiple blades and levels, and you've got the terrifying custom saw blade disc rotors. There's so much to check out, and when I say a picture is 1,000 words, feast your eyes on these images. It is amazing that the kind of like rust paint, which when we were chatting to Danger Home, he said it's actually a special paint that it is actually rust. It's not rust effect. And then it's paired with all these polished silver parts, and then the kind of brazed fork. It's really amazing. I really like the custom flask on the seat tube too. So yeah, let us know your thoughts in the comments below on that one. I think it's perfect. More e-gravel bikes. Raceface 160mm cranks. Over the last few years, a couple of brands have been dipping into the sub 165 crank territory. So this is crank length. I guess it was sparked initially by e-bikes and then partially by people experimenting with ways of reducing pedal strides and improving their riding stance. Shorter cranks, even down as far as 135 in some cases. They've become, well, much more popular. The latest brand to enter this short crank fray are Raceface, who've released both their alloy turbine and their carbon era cranks in a shorter 160mm length. Both these cranks come with Raceface's new lifetime, no questions asked warranty. The era comes in, so that's the carbon one, at $499 with a weight of 439 grams, and that's with not a chainring but all the other hardware including pedal washers and cute crank boots. The turbine, the alloy one, is $180 and it weighs at 512 grams, and that's including all the hardware but no cute little booties. Continuing the trend to higher bars across the mountain bike world, P&W have just released a 50mm rise version of their Loam carbon bars. Only available in a 35mm clamp, the new bars have a patent-pending CBD construction. No, not that CBD. This is a compliant bore design. Simply put, the bars are moulded around EPS core, which means a more consistent wall thickness and internal shaping through the bar, helping you get just the right amount of vertical compliance and horizontal stiffness. Basically, it makes them more compliant for bumps, but then it's stiff enough to sort of like predictably do steering and all the controlling stuff. They're available in 9 different colours, which is pretty wild, and if 50mm rise is a bit too much, they've also got a 25 and 38 as well. Here's a cool little tool from the Aussies at Butte Bicycles. So it's cute, but it's also very useful. I first saw it on the gram, and well, it's more than just cute, it's actually clever. Thanks to its small size, unlike, well, some other of the brand's piston tools that are really big, this one works on smaller 2-pot calipers as well. So it means you can use it on lots of different brakes. The washers are held on by magnets, and they're designed to, well, widen the kind of spread of the device, and that means it works with, as you might imagine, wider caliper bodies. So yeah, you can switch them out, works on lots. Yeah, great little tool. Quiz time, possibly my favourite part of the show. Maybe comments is. Right, quiz, sorry, being distracted. Last week I asked you where one-up components are based, and a lot of you got the right answer. The right answer being Squamish in BC in Canada. So yeah, lots of people should be on screen now. Well done to everybody. Well done, Tim, for getting in there very early. So, do we have to make it tougher? I feel like we do. So, let me think. Okay. What seminal TV show or TV series, only 2, technically 3 series were ever made, was set in PNW? Let me know in the comments. It first aired in the 90s. Hopefully that is challenging enough. Now we've got the Ask GMBN Tech section, which I've got to say I love. It's really fun answering your questions. Just use the hashtag AskGMBNTech in the comments section of any of our videos and we'll try and answer any of those nerdy questions we've got. And we've got a great one here from Maldridge7630. This was actually on one of the videos we did about bike fitting and when we went to visit Ergon. And the question is up on screen, it's quite long, but the key is for the questioner, the most important point for me was about the fore and aft position of the saddle. And yeah, first I probably need to apologise that we didn't kind of talk about the knee position and how that impacts those points enough. So knee positioning is useful because it's sort of focused around this knee over pedal spindle or COPS. And COPS has got pros and cons and some fitters don't like it, but it still can be a really useful tool to make sure that you're in the right position and create a sort of tighter window of fit. So we talk about the knee and it's a really good example of how well connected the body is because if we're looking kind of from the side view, when you move your cleat, that can kind of pull the knee forward and then, well, you might have to change where your saddle is. So they're all interconnected and it's a really good example of how important it is setting up cleats to line up with your knees to then line up where the saddle is. This is where we're using a plumb bob to hang vertically through a virtual position through the foot and through the pedal axle, all lining up. And effectively, we say ball of the foot, but if we're getting really nerdy, it's your first meta and your fifth meta. So effectively we're just talking about your toes and how you would find traditionally a kind of like medium between those 2 points. Modern bike fitters, and especially on mountain biking, we're looking kind of a rearward position of that. And that's because, well, having your cleats really far back and your foot further forward creates a more planted position on the bike. And if you're really getting keen, it means that it can, well, you don't rely on your calf as much to balance your foot, so it can be a better position. But if you're moving your foot really far forward or further forward, it means that, well, to make sure that your knee is over this point, which we're using the plumb bob to find, you might have to move your saddle. So yeah, if you've got more questions on bike fit, then let us know. It's a big, big topic, and hopefully that video can help you a bit, but let us know in the comments below if you want more. Comments. This is my favourite part of the show because I love diving into the comments with you. It's so much fun. And last week we were talking about how gearboxes and belt drives are going to take over the world. And well, in downhill, they sort of have. So, Knack Nuddy 2323 was very much in board. He would get a gearbox bike in a heartbeat. So once his current bike wears out, he's changing. And the positivity continued. Callum Ritchie said friends were convincing him or encouraging him to get an e-bike, and the Pinion MGE, so that's this motor gearbox unit, was the changing technology that convinced him for the upgrade. So yeah, he loves the gearbox. The belt drive is super clean. Saviour of rock and roll, or is it rock and roll? We'll say rock and roll. I think this is a really important point. He's saying that he's a proud owner of a roll-off hub since 2014, so a while ago. He rides aggressive, gravity-focused hardtail, and the roll-off is super good. He's never going to go back to conventional gearing. We should mention a roll-off has been around for a long, long time. Initially, it was sort of a 10-speed hub, and now I think it's up to 14-speed with electronic controller and all the sort of smoke and mirrors or jazzy features that you expect. And well, we completely forgot to mention it on last week's show. Right, who else have we got? Graham Foote. Hi, Graham, how are you? Yeah, he also flagged something we sort of didn't discuss, which is gearboxes, belt drives, perfect for downhill bikes, perfect for enduro, and perfect with bikes with motors. But with XC and those that want to kind of want to pedal at higher speeds, gearboxes do have a bit more mechanical drag. So yeah, they might not be for everybody. And he also talks about if somebody goes for that same approach that Honda did, which was, well, it looked like a gearbox, and we talked about it like a gearbox, but effectively it was a derailleur in a can. Seemed to work pretty well, won lots of medals. So, Family Smith, 3571, he's pulled the trigger on a zeroed Catapow on Monday. Smart shift, so that new system is what tipped him over the edge. Roy Steenho, I think that's the name, he's asked for a in-depth video on how gearboxes work. He sort of knows, but he'd love sort of like an up-to-date version on it. Watch this space, we'll try and do one. What else have we got? We've got Tajay has got a great question here. He's like, when he can get a gearbox for the same price as an XT drivetrain, he'll get one. Oh, and then some final bits. We do genuinely read all the comments. I was joined by Martin last week, and it was lovely to read this one from Timothy, who said, thank you, Martin and Owen, for an awesome, all uppercase show. It was just really heartwarming. We really do appreciate it. It's great. And Cade MTB1 also said, my favourite presenter is Blake. Okay, what's coming up this week? Well, we've got, if I was starting mountain biking today, here's the kit that I would buy. So really good beginner's guide. We've also got, are mudguards really worth it? Well, you'll have to watch the video to find out. But let us know all your thoughts on this new SRAM brake adapter. What's it going to do? Is it going to change the industry like UDH? Join the debate down below.